Okay, so everything has been sufficiently DevConned. For starters, we got this all filled in. I sanded some of it down a little bit. There's still plenty of more finished work to do, not only sanding, but also filling in a few of these little tiny voids. That is done both sides there. Also DevConned the jam door indicator holes shut, as well as the screw port that we're not going to be using, and the seam all the way around here and around the grip, both sides, as well as where the rails meet, inside here. I put a little bit around the seam inside where the battery, or not battery, the motor cage is going to be, as well as this little hole on both sides where the two shells interfered. Put some in there, and a little bit around kind of the back of the grip and back in here as well. And I also add a little bit more, and may add a little bit more yet, to the inside of the grip, just because there's going to be a little bit of torsional load there just in the course of handling the blaster. I could add some here, and I probably will just for in cases, since there's going to be a little squeeze area there. And I believe that's pretty well everything. It's pretty darn solid right now. Like, I don't have any real questions about its integrity. Once you stick it together, it's very, very solid, and there's no... I would have a heck of a time getting that apart without just cutting it outright. So now the blaster itself, the two have been merged, and we've got that out of the way. Now we can get into not only shaping this kind of delicate area we talked about before, which I might trim a little bit here. Let's pull this in. Dang it. Because you had this kind of swoopy line here that kind of came down, but then this kind of comes in down this way. So I'm kind of thinking about taking it right where it arcs back down and cutting it out and bringing this light in here and kind of shaping something so it kind of flows together a little bit better. Because I think if we just kind of blended it here, it'd kind of come down and then like donk donk, and that'd be weird. And we don't want weird, we want cool. So we'll address that in a little bit. I want to clean up some more of the DevCon, and then we'll play with some epoxy sculpt again. Down here in the grip, I'm really happy with how this part flows in here and this flows in here, and we get some really nice radiuses there. I'm really, really happy with how that turned out. However, the strife grip on the front is more square, whereas the Centurion kind of tapered this nice round arc. So I think what we're going to do is, for one thing, sand off the paint right in this area so the DevCon will stick better, and then build up the corners of the Centurion so it matches more of the characteristics of the strife grip up here, instead of trying to sand down the strife into that little toe in there. I'm going to be shaving off the little grippy detail here all the way and smoothing it out, and then adding something that comes all the way through and helps tie, the bottom of the Centurion up into the top of the Centurion area and kind of ties it all together. But we'll start with getting this ground down. I wanted to wait until these were actually merged and everything to see just how close they were. We will have to do a little bit of shaping as well, because the Centurion is narrower at the tip here, but it's wider in the middle, so you have kind of a low spot, high spot, low spot, which is kind of weird. So I think we get rid of this thing and we can kind of look at and see about maybe something that kind of ties the whole works together and kind of cure a few different little issues all at once, which would be super nice. Up here there's that little weird spot that we talked about before where the shells didn't match up exactly how I wanted, so there's going to be a little bit of delicate work to make this not look as weird. This side is pretty clear for the most part. No real weirdnesses to speak of there. One thing, most Strife Centurion builds take the nose here, like we talked before, and bring it straight down, but I want to pull it forward a little bit, and I marked this out here as just kind of eyeballing if we could get away with angling this forward a ways, and then I want to add something down here to kind of fix all this kind of weirdness and make it look a little more cohesive, just that way this doesn't just drop off oddly and have this little shelf. I'm not sure. I'm gonna have to go to the parts bin. I might look and see what leftover bits we have here, and see if we can pull a couple lines down, or do we have anything upside down? That'd be weird. But yeah, look at a few things there. One thing I do want to do is back here, just because we had, I had considered, well, when I first was looking at the Stripeturian thing, one of the first deals was he wanted this this kind of grip guard thing, and when you have that on there, it covers up half of this little detail here on the strife, and I thought it'd be weird to have, you know, the perforated detail that's just kind of haphazardly covered up, and so I want something that looks a little more intentional. So I think what I'm going to do is kind of like what we did with the Centaur. Excuse me. And take this, but instead of doing like the flared Magwell thing, we just want basically the surface detail. So I think I will, yeah, grind some of this off, and basically take maybe like here, maybe. Does that line up right? And basically we just want a little bit of just this kind of texture and detail and stuff, so it's not just this flat or have this weird thing here. So we'll take it and it'll run right up into this, and then we have to find something clever to do here. But that should cover up to that point, and then up in here we'll, you know, like I said, pull some other details or something, but at least that'll take care of this deal and make it look a little more, as we always say, cohesive. Make it look like one shell is going on instead of having such a sharp break into different details. Oh, yeah, the angle here, not quite sure what the plan is. I think I'll start with the angle cut, see what we can do with it. Worst case scenario, we can always cut it back kind of normal in the usual manner and see how that goes. So I'll do a little cut and a little trimming, and we'll see how things look in a little bit. Okay, got some things filled in, got the priming slot filled, got the shield detail entirely shaved down, and had to fill a couple little voids there. I did this just because I left the shield detail on the Centaur and had plans for it, and I wanted this to be a little more unique. So instead of doing the same thing, I decided to eliminate it altogether, and we'll, you know, that way the two blasters don't have too much in common. That way they're still independent, but yet still similar. Everything is bonded inside and out. I lopped the front off here to start kind of working on that line a little bit, and I decided we can get away with leaving the muzzles and the usability of the muzzles here, as long as you're prepared to open the shell, split it to get to the whole muzzle assembly thing, take the piece off. So it's not going to be a quick change, but that's certainly an option I'm looking at and kind of working towards that. And then if that doesn't work, we can always go a different direction. But priorities right now is working on this awkward space here, because I left this hanging because I wanted to do something with it, and I think I already talked about adding this detail to the bottom to help clean this up, but it still leaves not only this weird area here, but the leftovers from up in here. So I consulted the parts box, and I came up with a couple options, which have their own positives and negatives, I guess. First is this bit of Ravonics, which has the original, you know, the spot where the priming handle was, that's nice and straight and stuff like that. And we could set it there, and that would basically take this line straight down and straight back. There's plenty of length to come all the way to this little drop down area. Let's put a little more zoom that way. That'll work for us, so we can see what's going on. That'll carry this line straight down to basically the bottom of the strife body here before it turns into rail, and be able to take it straight back. We can do that, and that'll just block it off, which is still good. And then I found we can also take this route, which is a rough cut, and if we line up this angle here, we can basically size it up right. I don't know if it's showing up on the camera. There we go. Yeah, kind of like that, roughly. And we can carry the same line here down this way by basically just cutting this off here and back. So you'd have kind of a half of an arrow, so to speak, kind of a line that we'd cut out of this. So you'd be taking advantage of this nice straight line, and also be able to take advantage of this kind of cutbacks. This is basically the same angle, or at least close enough I think we can work with it. I'll know more. I think I'm going to go ahead and, probably to start with, just cut it off kind of along here, just so we have a smaller piece to fit in, and then kind of trim as we need to. And then it'll come back and probably end up trimming maybe just right along. Maybe I'll just start with that. I'll cut along this line here, at least to this point, and cut it up. Well, yeah, I'll just cut along this kind of body line here to this point and bring it up, and then I'll kind of trim it into fit and see how that looks. That gives us the option, instead of necessarily having it come down to a point, which might be kind of weird. There again, we'll see once we actually start fitting it. We can also probably cut it off right about here, right in front of the screw post, and be able to use that screw post to keep the front of the body nice and tight, instead of having just kind of loose pieces kind of flapping on the front that might be prone to snagging on things. We still need to kind of cap the very end of things, but we'll kind of see how that goes, once we have extra material here. I think what I'm going to do, I left this material because I wasn't sure what we were going to do, and I did bond it here and a little bit on the back and in a few spots. I think what I'm going to do is cut right along this edge here, because technically it's bonded all the way down, or there's material all the way down. So I think what I can do is I might be able to just even scribe it back across here, zip all the way down there, and then might be able to get a hobby knife in there and work the DevCon loose across there and get back to the original strife material. That way we have a nice consistent surface to work with here, so we're not working over overlapping stuff that we won't necessarily need to have. That might just, since we'll have a little bit of inconsistencies one side to the other, we can at least eliminate one variable. So yeah, and I think I'm just gonna favor this out of the way. Favor this line here at the bottom of the strife, not necessarily the top of the rail, but the actual body of the strife here, and carry that line all the way across, which will come up slightly higher than this. But I think by the time we overlap this guy in there, we might have a little bit of a gap, but we can fill that with some putty or DevCon or something like that. We can address that later. But I think building off of this line here will be a lot easier and cleaner than trying to build off of anything here. So I'm going to cut out this whole flat piece on both sides, clean it up a little bit, and cut, I think I'm going to cut both of these off. I have plenty of rough cut shells to work with, so if we sacrifice one, I'm not too concerned. And this guy's cut up pretty bad anyway, and I'm not necessarily sure what I would use this piece for on anything else, so I think I'll go ahead and cut it. In fact, I think I'm going to cut it. I took some rough measurements, and basically if I cut forward and back of this existing slot, because it's roughly there, if I favor this existing solid line and hold it up to this solid line here, then any irregularities front or back from those cuts, because we will have to cut back about to this screw post anyway. So if there's any irregularities there, we still will know we're getting a nice perpendicular cut by lining up the existing, this line here and this line here. So I'll cut that, and just for the heck of it, we'll try test fitting both, and I'll come back once I get these pieces cut out. Okay, I'm afraid I got a bit carried away with my cutting here without updating, but I got this guy cut out, but I just really didn't like the, I like the extension of the angle, but I don't like how much little material there is below, and we talked about even shortening this up a little bit to give it a little bit of a square end, but it just really wasn't enough to really make me happy, I guess. I don't know, wasn't doing what I wanted it to do. So I decided to forego that piece together, or entirely, and went with the Ravonics piece, which has already been partially DevConned into place, but fits beautifully. And I did have to shorten it up a little bit because it was a much wider piece, but in order to get it to tuck in where I wanted, I had to trim some of this off the end, and I have to trim, clean up this cut a little bit more to make it nice and and straight, especially when we get the other piece put on there. But that does exactly what I wanted it to do. It comes all the way down past, down to the rail here. It's a nice smooth surface, has just a bit of a break where it comes down into this here. It, I don't know, it just turned out really nice. I'm really happy with how that came out. So I will break the glue loose from here and finish the DevCon, and then I will flip it over and do the same thing to the other side. Okay, I've got both these filler panels DevConned into place. Did have to notch out a little bit around the motor cover area on the strife. Next, before I DevCon that in all the way, I decided to look into filling this area. So what I did was I cut out the whole Magwell piece from what's left of the Centurion and held it up, and then kind of made a just kind of rough cut to get rid of most of the material here. Traced out the line from the Magwell cover, and I still have to fine tune this, but I want to fine tune this with this in place so it's like a real snug fit. So the most important part was to get it in place here so I could locate this, so I could maintain the orientation and everything of where this is before I start to trim this one to fit. So I lucked out and did a little bit of trimming around the top here, flattened everything else out, removed the stuff on the inside so it'll just lay flat since it is just a decorative piece. And this angle here matches up. Oh, I got it right that time. This piece here, this angle lines up. This does cover up this screw, but once it's in place, I'll come through and drill a hole from the back, using this hole as a guide, coming through the front, and then I'll drill a bigger hole here, and then be able to fill around it. And so we'll still use this hole for securing the shell, but this piece will be kind of lapped over it. But this here actually lines up pretty good. It leaves just a little bit of a bump here from the strife, which I don't see any reason to not leave. This bump here is kind of weird how it kind of jumps into the kind of the grip area, but I'm not too concerned since we're already kind of tying everything together anyway, as far as the grip into the rest of the shell, so it doesn't have quite that independent grip panel, so to speak, like the strife has and a lot of the other blasters have. This will kind of tie it together a little bit more, which we might have to get creative, especially when we get ready for painting and stuff, to kind of differentiate the grip from the rest of everything else, but we'll see how that goes. This here, shaved off, like I said, a majority of it, left a little bit, so we have those angles coming down, and so that kind of locks in pretty well right there, clunk, into this little spot here. So I think I'm going to tack that in a few spots with some hot glue, and then I can come back and, well, I guess for starters I can rough out or get a little closer comparing this line here. Let's see, this is right here, so if we pull it straight down, okay, it's gonna come a lot further back. So we will have to, I think what I'm gonna do, I have a little bit of material, it does stand off of the strife shell just a little bit, so I think what I can do is I could probably get away with DevConning this in place for keeps, and then just use the barrel sander on a Dremel and just kind of kiss this back just a little bit, and then test fit it, and then back a little bit, test fit it, until we have just a really nice snug fit. And then when I DevCon this surface here, I think I'll put some tape around this piece, put some DevCon in there, and then slide this into place. So this will act as kind of a mask of sorts, so that we can get a precise fit when we seal up this front seam, this front joint. So we'll kind of get the dual purpose of not only making this a lot smoother overall, but also getting a nice snug fit as we glue this front. So I think that's how we're going to do it. But I think that will look really nice, just kind of looking at it like that. Let's pull it back out. I think that gives a little more continuity of style, of aesthetics and stuff. Like I talked about before, I didn't like the idea of leaving the perforated panel here that's going to be half covered up. If we weren't using this at all, then I probably would have left this area on the strife, since it's pretty much unaffected by anything else. but since we are covering up half of it, I thought that would have looked weird having a panel kind of just sticking out and then having holes kind of run into this. So I think having this, we can have a solid line come up to here, and it'll help tie everybody together. And actually that'll cover up everything but the grip on the strife, which I'm okay with, because that seems to be what I do best. So yeah, I think we'll stick this guy into place here and check back after that's done.